So we're going to be having our first panel of the day, and first panel of the conference actually, which will be moderated by Tom Rosenstiel from the American Press Institute. And I mean, I'm going to just let him to do the introductions of his panels, but I look forward to experience this discussion because I think we have a lot to discuss in the next few days to see how fact-checking and investigative journalism can overlap in their mutual mission. So hope you will also enjoy this conversation, and also feel free to please enrich with your questions after the discussion. So thanks so much.
Hey, good morning. So this is the first panel. You've had coffee, and you've also had a morning where you've heard a lot of great things. We applauded fact checkers. We heard about award winners. In pedagogical theory and at conferences, people begin to learn more when they become confused, when there's a gap, when things become more complicated than they thought they were. So that's what we're going to try and do, make fact-checking seem more complicated than it was, and make you think, oh, shoot, I guess I was wrong about some of these things I was thinking 20 minutes ago. So I'm going to start with a provocation. You know, we're in a moment where we're seeing the rise of despotism, populists, misinformation, filter bubbles, polarized audiences. The President of the United States, Glenn Kessler has counted, has lied almost 11,000 times in 2 years. He doubles down on lies. When you fact check him, he okay, good. Now you fact check me, I'm going to repeat that thing a lot more times. So our panel is fact checking as a tool for holding the powerful accountable. Really? Are we doing that? Are we doing so good at that, or were we kidding? With that as a prelude, we have a really good panel, and we're going to dig into this. Let's start by having each of you introduce yourselves, describe your organization and exactly the work you do. Do it quickly, because I think we want to have a lot of questions.
Is it working?
Yeah.
Okay. So, hello everybody. Good morning. It's not morning. Okay. So, actually, I am the new director of Doğruluk Payı, which is the Turkish political fact-checking website. And it's been 5 years that we started this project. And why I am the new director of our project? Because my boss, I mean my old boss, is now the boss of all of us, I guess, because by bars, yeah, is there. And that's why we changed the position in our project. And we are doing, as I said, political fact-checking in Turkey. We are basically checking the Turkish politicians' statements every day, but that's not all the thing that we do. We are also creating some kind of informative articles every day, creating some new kind of video formats, and also we are doing promise tracking to see if they are fulfilling their promises to the Turkish public. So yeah, thank you.
And staff of how many?
Right now, in total, 11. And it's getting bigger every year. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Tanya Pampaloni, and I am the managing editor of the Global Investigative Journalism Network. We are a nonprofit based in Washington, D.C., but we have editors around the world. We publish daily in 7 languages, and we support nonprofit investigative journalism units around the world. We have a membership that's just grown. I saw we put out a story today. We're over 180 small nonprofit investigative journalism groups around the world in over 70 countries. I oversee the website and our editors. What else can I tell you? We have a big conference every other year, and this year will be in Hamburg. So we host the largest gathering of investigative journalists, on an international investigative journalists. So a lot of collaborations happen there. I also happen to be the former executive editor at the Mail and Guardian here in South Africa. I'm based in Johannesburg and have been for many years. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Govind Raj, founder of factchecker.in, a fact-checking initiative which we started late 2013, early 2014. More recently, late 2016, we started Boom, which is a fake news busting initiative, and the two are distinct because fact-checker focuses more on the institutional side, fact-checks people in public life, fake news you know all about. The reason we started both of these in some ways is because of something that we founded earlier called India Spend, which is a data journalism initiative which was created with the objective of improving the quality of public discourse and working with data and evidence. So that led us to working on fact-checking, and which in turn led us to working on busting fake news in India.
Hi, good afternoon or noon. I'm Gemma Mendoza. I lead Rappler IT, the fact-check project of Rappler, a purely online news organization, one of the leading online news organizations in the Philippines. We're currently the apple of the eye of the president. I had the unit that does the fact-checking, but it originated as the same unit that gathers strategic data sets and documents, primary documents for Rappler, for the use of the entire news organization in various reporting projects. So we produce, apart from gathering the data, we produce explanatory pieces, in-depth pieces that try to nuance issues and provide more context. But towards the elections in 2016, when we started, during the candidate debates, we started regularly fact-checking the statements of political personalities, the candidates, particularly the presidential and vice presidential candidates. And then moving forward after that, it became kind of a regular project because we saw quite a lot of information, not just all these false claims that are being said by our public officials, but also a lot of false claims circulating online. So that's been, it's a small unit. Right now we have 8 people I directly work with, but the rest of the organization, every now and then we pull in reporters who are domain experts in various fields, or the ones who are actually covering the different issues or beats, and they help with the fact checks also.
Okay, so I actually am going to switch the order of the questions that we were talking about. I'm confusing the panel as well as the audience. Classic fact-checking is someone says something and we determine whether it's false or true. Investigative reporting, classically, is we spot some wrongdoing, a larger problem, social problem, and we tell the story about it. And it's either probably explanatory, we're exposing a larger issue, or it's the classic watchdog of a kind of prosecutorial journalism. You've done something wrong, this needs to be fixed. What is the relationship between fact-checking, which is that claim is false, and investigative reporting in that larger sense? What's the overlap, or is fact-checking just a small subset, a chink? Anybody want to take that on?
So, can I go? Okay. I think if you look at the evolution, of organizations like ours, and I suspect it's the same story elsewhere too. We started out more mechanically, using a computer, using the internet, checking, and maybe looking at facts, having a public policy plus research background person in the team, collating things and trying to find discrepancies and so on. I'm talking about fact-checking when it comes to the institutional, looking at people in public life and the statements they make. I think as we've evolved, as we've started doing those stories, we've also started adding more reporting capacity. And most of us I think it was pointed out in the morning, for instance, there are people from different backgrounds. There are people from technology backgrounds. There are people from journalism backgrounds. So I come from a journalism background. I used to be a financial journalist for more than 25 years. So the way I look at stories is different than perhaps others would. So as we've gone along, we've tried to do more on-ground reporting, combined it with investigation, combined it with reaching out to people in authority and asking them questions. So for instance, let's say a popular claim in India has been, by the government, has been that they've built almost 90 million toilets, which is a very, very important objective and mission. But, and it's very difficult to debunk that, and nor are we trying to debunk that figure itself. But what we've done is by reporting from the ground, in different parts of the country, taking pictures, we've showed that the project, while it may be working on paper, it is not really working on ground. People are not using it. There's not enough water connections. People are not socially aware of the need to use toilets, and therefore that raises questions on the project itself. So there are several examples like that where we've taken claims made by, let's say, government bodies or institutions and used on-ground reporting to actually go and check. So if the government says we've electrified so many villages, then we would look at the numbers, we would crunch the numbers, we would also combine it with on-ground reporting. So to that extent, I think, at least from as we speak or as from where we sit, the extent of reporting on-ground and investigation is only increasing by the day.
So the claim is a doorway into a much bigger issue, and your reporting is getting deeper and thicker around. How about at Rappler? You sounds like you started as an investigative place that moved to fact-checking.
So, as I was saying, the fact-checking at Rappler really started out as part of the regular newsroom processes. We wanted to do reports that are quality reports, so we would make sure that we have all the facts that are, and sometimes the facts are not readily available in countries like the Philippines. You actually have to knock on a lot of doors to get the documents and to get the data sets you need. So in a way, getting to the truth of a particular claim in itself is already involved some sort of investigation. But the other part of it that we also do is that when we fact check something, we don't just stop there. We look at, particularly when it's happening in social media, because when you're looking at regular fact checking, and looking at fact checks. Or fact-checking claims by people who are in power, the person who made the claim is known to people. So the source of the claim is clear. In the case of social media, it's a lot murkier because you don't know if the account that actually circulated the claim is the source of the claim or is just part of a whole body of a whole network that's behind a disinformation campaign. And that's something we go into further. We try to gather the data, not just on the fact checks, that not just related to the fact checks, but also data on the claims themselves and the networks that are circulating these claims, because it's very important as the network, the space where this is getting circulated.
Right.
It's already.
It's interesting. You're fact-checking the distribution system and not just the actor. You have this network that you support. What is the relationship here between fact-checking and the larger discipline of investigative reporting?
Yeah, so I'm thinking of two things. I'm thinking of Govind and Gemma and kind of hearing what they're doing. I mean, part of what we do at the Global Investigative Journalism Network, very much part of investigative journalism, we consider to be data journalism. So you coming from a data journalism background, and you know, and Rappler is one of our members. I mean, as an investigative journalist.
So are we.
Yes,
so are we.
yes. So I mean, so I mean, I think that they're so closely tied to one another. So it's, and I think that what Peter said is like, it's an octopus, right? It's like, that's why I think when we had our initial discussion, we spoke on Skype, and it was, you know, it's you know, I'm interested in kind of like the definitions of investigative journalism, in-depth journalism, data journalism, you know, fact-checking. I mean, what we're doing is journalism, right? And we're doing proper journalism. You know, I mean, there was a time when you didn't say fact-based reporting. I mean, it's reporting. So, but now we have to say fact-based reporting because people don't understand the difference between opinion-based reporting and fact-based reporting, and we have to be able to kind of like, we have to underscore the fact that we're doing facts and that they're not alternative facts, and you know, in our kind of 1984 dystopian world. So I think that, you know, so I think that there is, you know, Peter's kind of like, I love the idea of the octopus. I did want him to have a presentation with an octopus.
I thought we were the sharks and the octopus was it was confusing.
Actually, I think there might be a small difference between classical fact-checking pieces and the investigative journalism reports. As classical fact-checkers, as you all know, we don't actually targeting the people who is claiming that, you know, thing. But I guess you kind of have to go into more, you know, deeper levels of targeting a person who is behind that, you know, wrong thing that you are reporting on. So I think that's a critical difference between classical fact-checking and the investigative reporting, because we always say to our readers that we are not, you know, chasing the politicians, but we are chasing the claims. We try to, you know, get it right, the claims, not the people. We used to try to change the politicians in Turkey, which was, you know, quite a dream. But then, after a point, we just stopped doing it. And we said to the public, to our readers, that we are only, you know, following the claims, and we are only trying to, you know, correct them. And this is also correcting the people, the politicians, but maybe in a longer way, you know, maybe because you just can't change a politician's mind just with one piece of your fact-checking, you know, reports. So we just chose the longer path, and I hope at least we are doing the right thing. We will see.
So that gets me to the harder question that I was going to ask you guys, and Peter brought it up in his talk today. And that the question basically could be stated as, what is your theory of change? You are, you know, saying, okay, that's false. There's a variety of options, and you know, it could be that you are trying to educate the public about what's true and what's not, and that they will know, and the politician can lie all he wants or she wants, but you have told your audience, no, that's not true. It could be that you are trying to discourage the political figures from lying by raising the stakes. If you lie, we'll call you on it, and perhaps even, as Mark Stencil has written, if you lie and we call you on it, your opponent will use what we've done to attack you, so you shouldn't lie as much. It could be that your theory of change is much simpler. He's speeding. I gave him a ticket. I don't really have a theory of change. I'm just doing what I should be doing as a journalist, which is telling people what the facts are. I'm not an ethnographer. I can't worry about how it all comes out. What is it that each of you has in mind, or do you have a theory of change, or you're just handing out tickets? All of which is good, but I want to know, particularly in this environment that we're in now. Why don't we start with you? You've had a despot for how long now? How long has that guy been in power? 15 years?
15?
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. You were what? You were like 2 when he started?
No. Yeah. This question will be probably the most, hardest question in this 2 days conference, and thank you for that. So I was thinking about this actually this whole week, and I'm not so sure if we have a specific solid theory of change, but we always try to not to intimidate any kind of political let's say fanatics in Turkey. I mean, for example, at least half of our country is still, after so many years, still supporting the ruling party in Turkey. And it is crucial that you just don't intimidate any of the supporters of the ruling party. Because if you are only working one side in a country like Turkey, then you are, destined to fail. It's a very obvious thing, So, for example, I always envy the, let's say, PolitiFact's, pants on fire kind of shows, but we cannot use those kind of things in Turkey. For example, after 5 years, we never write the word lie in any of our pieces. We never say that someone is lying about something. We never use that. Because if you do, I mean, for example, we say that the president is lying. After that point, none of the supporters of that party, because this is how, fanatic they can be in Turkey, they never follow you. Even if you are always, debunking the opposition sides, they never follow you. They never believe you. They never trust you anymore. So we are always trying to, at least with our language, try to catch them all, catch the whole public. It doesn't matter who are they supporting. It doesn't matter if they are coming from the opposition side or the ruling party side, but we try to catch them all. And also, another thing that, I mean, as you know, Turkey is a huge country, but the most important thing, I guess, is how young the population is in Turkey. And that's important for us, because we are always targeting the young people in Turkey, and because it's important, if you can, change the way that how they see things in the political atmosphere in Turkey, they can spread the word in the next generation and then the next one. So we are trying to providing some kind of fact-checking workshops. It's been like 3 years right now, and probably we just managed to, teach more than 500 young university students in Turkey so far. And I guess this could be our theory of change to reach to the young community of Turkey.
It's really interesting. So, I would paraphrase that as saying an honest broker and dispassionate, and particularly establishing credibility with the next generation and teaching them news literacy skills along the way. How about you?
Yeah, I do think that's a tough question, but I guess, I believe in journalism. I just believe that we have to have it. I don't want to live in a world where you either have the politicians or the corporations telling us what's true and what's not. And so it's difficult for me to kind of get my head around this theory of change. It's I don't want to live in a world, and that term theory of change just reminds me of kind of what you have to tell the donor in order to get the money for. What is our theory of change? So our theory of change at GIJN would be we want to educate as many journalists as possible in investigative journalism and investigative journalism techniques, and that's our mission. For me personally as a journalist, it comes from that kind of space of, we are the first kind of version of history that, and we have to make sure we get it right, and we owe that to future generations. And so, so I think you're bringing up a difficult question that's hard for me to get my head around, outside of kind of this is what the donor needs to hear or wants to hear. What the donor needs to hear and what the public needs to hear is that, do you want to live in a society without journalists, without any kind of, without, what we do, and that is, the essence of journalism. Help me here. What we do is we practice in verification. Right. We're not just storytellers that are taking down things. We are verifying. And
the essence of journalism is a discipline of verification.
Thank you. The elements of journalism. If you just Google that, please. So that's what I believe in. Is we have to have verifiers, and we are those verifiers, and we owe that to future generations and to history to get things right. Is that a theory of change?
Yeah, no, right. Theorists usually were practitioners. So I'm trying to create a knowledge deficit so that people become more open to new things they're going to hear over the next 2 days. Now you've just heard my theory of change.
So, when we started, we said we want to improve the quality of public discourse by using data to tell stories. Somewhere along the way, and more recently, as we've battled fake news and misinformation, we've added to and also make the internet safer. So I think there are two constituencies here. I think when it comes to politicians and the institutions, I would say in India and maybe in other countries too, except for, let's say, Donald Trump, largely politicians are a little more careful today. And I can surely speak from our perspective about what they say, because they know that even if there are only a bunch of guys who are small and insignificant in the scheme of things, thanks to social media and so on, the word gets out, and therefore they have to be careful. The second part is saying that, okay, in a world of misinformation and fake news, how do you convince audiences which are in hundreds of billions about what's true and what's not? And that's clearly, it is like boiling the ocean. And there, I think, in some ways, by calling out people who are influencers, we reduce the supply or constrain the supply. But the larger challenge will be for some time, because the creators are also getting more and more ingenious and smart. How do you convince a lot of people about being more aware about what they consume and using wisdom, which is beyond literacy, in the manner that they consume? And I think that's a big challenge. So some of us, and I can see around the room as well, have started, let's say, educating. We worked with Google last year, for instance, on a program to touch 8,000 journalists on fact-checking and using case studies to do so. And we are being approached by schools in at least 2 metro cities in India to come and hold workshops on fact-checking and more importantly, making people aware. But the larger challenge to me, even as we think about the theory of change, is that the mistrust deficit is rising as we speak. So people don't trust a lot of things. I mean, if you look at the vaccine debate, people are not trusting science. People are not trusting their own doctors. So people are not trusting mainstream media for sure in very large this thing. And the fact that you have a president who calls out mainstream media as fake news every other day doesn't help either. So how do you battle something, an environment where there is such a high level of mistrust across everything, and where do you begin? To me, is the larger challenge today, and the internet plays a very significant role in that, because that's the sort of the core, the platform, the disseminator, and the accelerator of information and misinformation. But like I said, I think if I look from where we've started, I think we've achieved some success in some areas, and we continue to work in other areas.
It's funny that you talked about crime earlier, because I was thinking about there's a difference between the solutions for the ordinary street crime and then syndicated crime. So part of our approach is we really need to understand the nature of something, of the problem, in order to have the right solution for it. And a big part of that is like really studying, like there's the one-offs, there are the claims that you fact check one by one, and that's very important. Teaching fact checking to kids and even to adults, particularly the baby boomers, is very important. Helping them understand the nature of the internet is very important. But it's also very important to understand that what's different now is that we're living in a digital space, and disinformation, misinformation has always been there, but with digital, that's been scaled up. It's something like a claim, for instance, in the case of the Philippines, claims related to the media are amplified so fast and repeated so many times that it becomes truth to many people. So it's important to look at those things and employ different approaches. For the ordinary street crime, for the individual fact check, it's about actually fact checking and calling out and surfacing what is the truth. And tagging those that are lies or that are false or hoaxes, and teaching the public how they can do it on their own. But for syndicated crime, for network disinformation, the solution is a lot different. It involves working with the platforms. It involves working with other groups that could help make change possible.
Yeah, that's really interesting to the idea that you're going to look at the nature of the deception, not just where it comes from and is it bots, but even a statement that a political figure keeps repeating. Now it's not. Now there's recidivism, repeat offending. So you might even go deeper and say, all right, why? What's the context here? Why is he doubling down on this? Now I'm going to have to get. It's more like a complex crime than a simple crime. It's interesting to think about what's the nature of the error.
I think the response to that also is investigative journalism. I mean, if you, a politician or anyone, keeps making a statement that is usually responded by no, saying that's false.
Yeah.
And alternatively, you have an investigative report which combines many elements of on-ground reporting, deep investigation, numbers, crunching, all of that. I think the people who, the politicians themselves and those around them, would be a little more alert and perhaps a little more careful about what they say the next time, because they know that the effort that's going into to counter what they're claiming is far more than just doing an internet search. And I think, to me, as in our own evolution, I think that's been an important learning.
So another element of that, it seems to me, is to get at why a politician is telling this particular lie, the motive, what's the dog whistle or the subtext of this lie. So you're now not just saying that's wrong, but here's why he keeps or she keeps repeating this. Let's get into cases that you've had recently that you think were particularly successful. And what about them was successful? Was it that it was a local politician? Was it the nature of the claim? Can you get into what has gone well recently and why you think that is? Whoever wants to jump in first. We don't have to keep doing that. Whoever's got one present of mind.
Oh yeah. Recently, probably it's the local elections in Turkey, because it was quite popular. They're not so popular, the local elections in Turkey, but this time it was a little bit different. It was in late March this year. And why it was important? Because the ruling party kind of lost it. That's why it mattered that much. But don't get me wrong, they still got like half of the votes in the whole country, but they just lost the biggest cities of Turkey. Istanbul, Ankara, these two are the most crowded ones, and they just lost it after 25 years. They were ruling those cities for 25 years. And, it was important for us because whenever there is an election in Turkey, which is, it's quite a thing in Turkey because we had like 6, I guess, elections in the last 5 years. And it's always so important for us to cover what the politicians are saying, especially in the election times, because their statements are getting, quite popular in a very short time in the election times. So we started to cover their statements and so on, but the most important part was right after the elections. In the following week after the elections, our followers actually demanded us some pieces, because there were some misinformation around the country, and our followers asked us if we can cover some specific topics. For example, we decided to create a content that we covered how the population changed after the elections. The political parties, how much population will they rule right after the elections? And we compared this with the older local elections. it was a little bit shocking because people saw that the ruling party, AKP, they just, I mean, in 2014, after the local elections, they were ruling, I guess, 68% of the country. And after this election, they, I mean, were supposed to rule like 36 or 37% of the country. And it was quite shocking for everybody. And the main opposition party, they just got, you know, like they will, not will, but they were supposed to rule like the half of the country right now. But as you probably know, the ruling party just managed to cancel the Istanbul elections, and we will have a re-election in June, actually next week, and we will, you know, try to cover the whole things again. And by the way, we decided to, you know, name this crazy months of Turkey Deja Vu, and we created a video concept which was named Deja Vu, and we just try to show people how we are always doing the same thing in the country.
Right, right. So localness made a difference because people knew more about where they lived.
And the demand of the people, actually. Yeah.
How about you guys? What's worked? What would you say, wow, that was really the mission?
Well, I mean, you know, there's something, I mean, what's amazing that happened in South Africa recently is the Gupta Leaks. And that was for me, it was like, and this is what I see like every day in our work and at GIJN is, you know, kind of, you know, what's happening on it, you know, in individual countries. And you see what happened with the Gupta Leaks here in South Africa. That taking down, I mean, that was years and years of dogged reporting by literally a handful of reporters, literally.
Does everybody know what this is?
Yeah, so you can Google hashtag Gupta Leaks. So basically, this was it ended up being like an email that was leaked of around a family called the Guptas in South Africa, and they're the ones that at the top, when Peter was speaking, he spoke about state capture. They were the big family that were originally from India who came to South Africa and basically got in very close with Zuma and began buying off Zuma and the Zuma administration. And so for years, a handful of journalists were reporting Zuma Inc., you know, particularly Sam Sol and Stefan Sprumer from Abu Mungani, but there were others, of course. And then the Gupta Leaks came, and there was this massive tranche, and there was no backing up. And Zuma ended up resigning. President Zuma ended up resigning. Now, it was years of pressure and years of him ignoring. And that, to me, is the power of what we do and the power of investigative journalism. And we see it every day. And I mean, we see, I think, you know, kind of the power of this kind of network is we can amplify one another's work. You know, we wouldn't know, you know, what's happening in Turkey if were it not for kind of the international community being dogged in their kind of reporting on what's happening in Turkey. I mean, what's happening in Hungary now. I mean, it's you know, we have, you know, these kind of small units that are, you know, reporting about the global elite, because that is the problem right now, to follow the money. I mean, you know, so I think that, you know, that's what we, you know, kind of need to continue to do, is these kind of like global collaborations, because, you know, a story that comes out of Botswana or Mali is not going, you know, without the rest of the global community kind of amplifying those issues, it doesn't get outside the country, and the politicians don't care. Right. But when they feel that global pressure, and that's something that, you know, groups like this and this kind of, you know, have the power to actually change, you know, on a local level, and on an international level, it is putting on that pressure. And I mean, and the U.S. is obviously not immune, and they need that kind of continued pressure as well, because they're feeling what the rest of, you know, the world has been feeling for years. We're in the first 18 minutes of a movie. You guys are in the last. Yeah. What's worked, and then also, what do you see changing in the next year or two?
So the last election is not an evidence of what worked, because for the first time in 30 years, we have senatorial elections where all the winners were from the administration, and that is that hasn't happened for 3 decades now. But in terms of like what I think, I'm looking more at like what changed in the conversations on social media. So like in the initial months and after the elections, after 2016 elections, and even in 2017, when we were at the time we were just starting to expose what was happening on social media, there was actually there was silence. I mean, in fact, we thought at the time, because we actually actively engaged on the comment sections in social media, and we monitored the conversations, and then practically everything was like, it's like the world hated us. And that's not an exaggeration. It's like nobody liked us at all. And then when we started talking about this, we started doing the workshops to show like what was happening, and started to really talk to people about it. And kept on reporting, kept on exposing, kept on fact-checking. What we are seeing now is that on the comments feed, people are actually calling out false claims themselves. And I guess that's something, that's some sort of change. It could have happened much, much later. And for me, that's a source of hope. What else?
So that's actually an example of something that went wrong that then caused you to change something.
Yeah. So people have been submitting things to fact check. That's something I think that means that people see the need for fact checking. And then one of the things that was really very lately, when Facebook started doing the page quality tab, we started getting reports from, getting requests or messages from the pages that have been, previous to this, they would just ignore the ratings. Nobody bothered to respond to us for ratings. But after that, very recently, they've started reaching out to us, the pages, and they started issuing corrections. So one actually did that very recently, and we were surprised because they actually posted the link to our fact check. And I guess that's something. Right. Despite the very bleak political scenario.
I think what we found is some of the biggest claims, some of the most difficult maybe fact checks are the biggest ones in a sense. So and particularly when data is used. I talked about the toilet example. The government also, for instance, said that there were more than, I forget the exact number, but more than 40 million women were given free cooking gas cylinders. And that's a big issue in India because women tend to cook over open wood stoves, and that is a health hazard. So it's a great program. And if you're seen questioning it, you could be seen adversely. So, but our investigation into that and the toilet example that I gave earlier provided the context which set the narrative. The context was that it wasn't working because of a certain reason. The toilets were not, not all of them, but a lot of toilets were not being used, were not working. There were other issues like I said, like to do with supply of water, the existence of water in some of those places and so on. So that it brought to light those challenges. In the case of the cooking gas cylinders, it turned out that it's a great idea. A lot of women who got those cylinders admired the government and the Prime Minister for doing so, but it turned out that it was unaffordable for them to go to buy the next cylinder. And equally, they were trying to see if they could balance out using both, using a cooking gas cylinder and a traditional wood stove. So, which in some ways defeats the purpose of what it was said to do. So, I think the investigation, beginning with a fact check, which may be around a certain number or a claim, could actually lead to more context, and that perhaps in many of our cases has provided far more interesting narrative and a discussion point or series of discussion points that we could have perhaps thought of when we started out. If I were to look ahead, I would see that, as we investigate more, as we spend more time on ground questioning some of these claims and trying to put physical context into those claims, my sense is that our reporting will become better, and we will become better doing so, and so will the people's appreciation of it, including those in power. And like I said, it's an early feeling, but that's the way I see things going forward.
Baybar is boss of all of us. Do you want us to do questions? Yes? Yeah, good. Okay. Who's got questions about the theory of change and deficit knowledge or other more interesting things? Well, I've got, yeah. Do we have a question?
Hi, this is Angie Holan, editor of PolitiFact. I was wondering if the panel could talk a little bit about how they see the balance of time between, let's say, the classic fact-checking model and the investigations. Because I think we all have the stereotype in our minds that fact-checking is something you do quickly and investigations are something that you take a long time to do. And I know for us, time is a resource in itself. So as an editor, I think about how much time do I want to devote to any given project. And then the other aspect of time is impact, that often something must be deployed, findings must be deployed right away to have any sort of impact. And the longer you take on things, the less impact it will have as it's farther away from when it was said. So I was wondering if you could talk about how you make decisions about coverage with those ideas in mind.
Speaking for ourselves, I think in the context of fact-checking, I think most of our work is now becoming investigative. So thankfully or otherwise, we have a separate initiative for busting fake news, which is obviously far more reactive, and things tend to get published quickly, and we may do 3 or 4 stories a day because it's easier to do. But I think that's the distinction we're trying to draw between fact-checking of the institutional kind and busting fake news. And busting fake news too, where we are getting more proactive. Like for instance, again in areas like health and medicine, where we see a lot of looming issues, creating explainers or fact files on, let's say, what is Zika virus or what is Nipah virus or vaccines, which we are trying to do because it's a very tough one, because the people who counter it are also smart. And so those are the kind of areas we're working on. But that's in some ways, I guess, a little different. I won't say it's simpler or more difficult, but it's different. But our core fact-checking work, the way when we started off in 2013-14, and we've evolved, is now getting, like I said, far more investigative.
Do those fake news, busting fake news, do those have a long tail where weeks and months later people are still going?
Yes. Yes, because it's quite evident that in many cases fake news posts and forwards tend to go around in circles. We've seen posts, for instance, let's say a famous one could be plastic rice. And and there would be a video where someone takes some rice, dips it in water, rolls it into a ball, and chucks it against the wall, and it comes back. So, and that video, for instance, may have started in India or may have started in China, comes to India, goes to Indonesia, goes to Thailand, goes back to Africa, comes back in about 8 months' time. So, and there are many more similar ones. Someone opens a packet of Lay's potato chips, takes out one, puts a lighter underneath, and says, "This is burning because there's plastic in it." And it's pretty convincing looking video. And it's all grainy video, shaking camera, and all of that. But so we debunked it, and it said, okay, it's burning because of starch, not because of plastic content in it. But this is classically the kind of video which tends to go round and round. So that's how it works.
Other people? Yeah.
Well, kind of the same question, but let me just ask, like when you fact check the politicians, words, and is it possible that you just fact check for years and find out what he said was false? When you talk about investigative reporting, that happened actually. We've been investigated like a month or sometime a year, but what Angie was asking was probably, when it comes to fact checking the politician, probably, the election. Is it possible, or have you done the fact checking the words of the candidates for months? Do you?
Well, not a candidate, but like for instance, there's this. Because in the Philippines, a lot of times the data is not available. So you actually really need to knock on a lot of doors and wait for people to respond to you in many occasions so that before you actually get anything. So like in fact, we have something right now. We're working on something right now that's been going on for months of follow-ups. But it's significant because it has to do with a major program of government. So it's really depending on the impact of the potential fact check. We decide to devote more time to it and make sure that we follow up on it depending on the importance of the issue. So if it's about a major concern, like we're talking about the major program of government, like the Build program, we make sure we follow up and all of that. But there was one instance, for instance, that where there's a claim, and it was more, the harm there was really more on, it was attacking media for prioritizing a particular report versus what is supposed to be like the biggest single day distribution of land in the Philippines. And so we went at it for months. Like we really waited and knocked on doors, went to the department concerned and called people up for the data. And then we ended up learning that they don't even record data by the day. They record everything that they sent us was all by the month or by the year, not by the day. So you couldn't really make a comparison. So things like that, we spend more time because of the impact of that potential fact check, but not really on.
We've answered the question of the panel. If it takes a day, it's a fact check. If it takes a month, I'm Balkrishna from India Today Fact Check. I want to ask something that you touched upon during the discussion. In the context of elections in India that held recently, we saw that there are a set of people who are churning out disinformation and propaganda one after another. They work in kind of factory mode. So generally, we stop at debunking the claim and not go to the extent of exposing people behind them. But in those cases where you see there are a set of people, so is it a good idea to go a step ahead and expose the people behind the propaganda?
No, I think it's a must do, but it's also very difficult. Except in some cases where we've clearly called out, let's say, people who create and man Facebook pages supporting a certain political party and a certain leaning. It's very difficult to pinpoint where it comes from because that's the nature of the beast. What we've also found is that it's difficult to pin the blame on a political party, for instance, because there are a lot of people who actually align with a political party for their own reasons. We found, for instance, that there were people in India who had created Facebook pages to essentially sell stuff like e-commerce, but using the Prime Minister's photograph to bring in web traffic. Right? So they really didn't have anything to do, or I don't think they had any ideological leaning with the Prime Minister or his party, but they wanted to benefit from the traffic that it would create and essentially go and sell, I don't know what the product was, but usually these products are like fairness creams and so on.
You know, we did an event in Washington, D.C. last week where Dana Boyd of the Data and Society said in her research she finds that particularly in misinformation campaigns, the goal of the campaign is to get a media organization to try and debunk it because that will accelerate the virality of the claim significantly. And that is always part of the strategy of of these things that are sort of manufactured. It's also interesting to me that we basically opened a new a landscape here in the way you've approached it, where you've said, okay, people can be misled by a number of things. The claims of political actors is one. Misinformation, which may be organically spread or inorganically spread, is another. And if we're in the business of fact-checking, sort of our field of vision is broadened from that. That may be part of where the intersection of investigative and fact-checking comes. Are we done, or do we want a couple more questions, boss?
Hello, I'm from BD Fact Check Bangladesh. You discussed about the differences between investigative reporting and fact-checking, but I think about the interpretative reporting is a part of investigative reporting, and because interpretative reporting is something to elaborate the idea, or as an example, interpretative reporting is about what is going on Middle East or who is going to be elected in the next election, something like that. So there is a clear line between the fact-checking and interpretative reporting. So, and you can see the automation fact-checking, there is nothing to investigate. So can we draw a clear line between these two?
Anybody? So, I think if you introduce this notion of automated fact-checking, which we heard about this morning, which is catching everything but is formulaic by its nature, as Bill was saying, how does that fit in? Is there a hierarchy here? Are we, is that like a speed camera that catches you but doesn't actually know who's driving, and then you go up from there? I don't know.
So it's, I don't know how to interpret the interpretative part, but I think, if you look at the kind of hoaxes that people like us deal with, usually it's to do with a YouTube video which is genuine and the description which is completely off. To give you an example from the region, there was a video doing the round which showed an aircraft in midair, and you could see that most of the people who looked of Central Asian origin inside the aircraft, grasping for breath, the oxygen mask dropping down, the plane shaking, and all of that. The description was, these are the last moments of the Ethiopian airline which went down after it took off, the Boeing 737 MAX. So now the thing is, the video was genuine, but it belonged to some other airline at another time, and that airline, I'm pretty sure, landed safely at the end of it. But this went viral, and so do so many such videos which are completely genuine in origin, but are interpreted differently, and that's what a lot of fact checkers and fake news busters deal with almost every day.
I was just, oh, okay. I was just thinking of the great work that Bellingcat's doing, and I think that there's so much. That's where I kind of come back to is the crossover, right? Is Bellingcat fact checking? Are they doing investigations? Is the BBC piece, the Africa Eye, that's up for nominated for the awards here? Was that fact checking or was it investigation? I think it's a combination of both, and I think that that's what we're doing, and that's what we should be doing. I don't think that we should go, okay, we're fact checking, we're only following up on the. Right? We're doing good journalism, and that's what I think doing good journalism.
So I want to thank the panel, and I would end with just this, which is that great reporting is the essence of all of this. All of the rest of it, in the theory of change, is distribution and marketing. Thank you. Which is important. Yeah.